Australia, I'm sorry to tell you, but we're a nation of losers. Per capita, we lose more gambling than any other nation. $1,200 per man, woman, and child. It is a national emergency. And it's not just how much we lose, it's how much we bet. In a country of 26 million people, together we bet just shy of $200 billion a year. That's more than $7,500 per person per year. Everyone recognises that something needs to be done about gambling in Australia, and that led to the federal government's review of the industry by the late Member of Parliament, Peter Murphy. I'm Ren from Equity Mates, and in this video, I'm going to explain what that inquiry found, what it recommended, and then why we're seeing the government walk away or water down some of those commitments lately. But first up, let's talk about what the report found. It was handed down in June 2023 and it was titled, "You Win Some, You Lose More." It found that the gambling industry spends $280 million a year on gambling ads. On top of those stats that I shared at the top of this video, it found that the gambling industry in Australia spends $280 million a year on gambling ads. And those gambling ads are having a massive effect. They are normalising sports betting for the next generation of Australians. Here's just some of the findings from the report. A 12-year-old child has not seen a sporting match without gambling ads in it. That's how ingrained it is in our sporting culture. 75% of 8 to 16-year-olds surveyed believe that sports betting is a normal part of sporting culture. And Senator David Pocock has spoken about how children under the age of 18 are now reporting to Gamblers Anonymous. In perhaps the most provocative line around the release of the report, Peter Murphy said, "Gambling advertising is grooming children." Based on those findings and after speaking to all the major sporting bodies, the gambling companies themselves, the broadcast partners, and a number of people and families struggling with gambling addiction, the report laid out 31 recommendations. But the most consequential recommendation was that over the next 3 years, we should completely ban all online gambling advertising in Australia. To dig into that recommendation, it was suggested that it work in 4 phases. Firstly, prohibit inducements, bonus bets or cashback or anything like that. Ban advertising on social media and online platforms, and ban ads during school drop-off and pick-up times. The second phase called for banning all online gambling advertising and commentary on odds, during, and an hour either side of sports broadcasts, also banning sports advertising on uniforms and in stadiums. The third phase was to ban all gambling ads between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. And then finally, the fourth phase was by the end of year 3, prohibition on all online gambling advertising and sponsorship. When these recommendations were handed down, at first it seemed like both sides of politics were pretty into these ideas. Peter Murphy was a Labor Party politician, and her leader, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, called gambling ads annoying. The Communications Minister, also from the Labor Party, Michelle Rowland, agreed and said the status quo isn't good enough when it comes to gambling advertising. The opposition leader, Peter Dutton, called for a ban on gambling ads during sports matches. So it seemed like there was pretty broad consensus that something needed to be done. But now, fast forward a little over a year, and it seems like the government is walking away from it. After the report's recommendations were handed down, the gambling lobby got to work. Now, the gambling lobby and the gambling companies have long been involved in politics. They've long been politically active, especially in donating money. For example, Sportsbet in 2022 donated $313,424 to political parties, spreading its contributions to both the Labor Party and to the coalition. But after the report's recommendations were handed down, a lot of the lobbying really focused on Communications Minister Michelle Rowland. She is the ultimate decision maker when it comes to these laws. It's been reported that gambling lobbyists met with the Communications Minister 66 times in the past 6 months. Sportsbet also donated more to Minister Rowland's campaign, which weren't reported because they were under the reportable threshold. But how about this? The AFR reported late last year the gambling industry also took Minister Rowlands out for a, quote, lavish lunch on her birthday. The lunch was held at the private dining rooms of Society Restaurant and hosted by Responsible Wagering Australia, which is the lobbyist that represents Sportsbet, Ladbrokes, Bet365, amongst others. Now, I know this isn't the point of this video, but I had to have a look at Society Restaurant's menu. Bread and butter starts at $12.50. Just a side of creamed potatoes sets you back $18.50. As a politician, if you're being taken there for lunch, you must know that you're being wined and dined. Now, we're not saying any of that had a connection to what happened next, but here is what happened next. Minister Rowlands is now watering down the recommendations of that gambling industry inquiry. Rather than banning gambling ads, the government has proposed capping the amount of gambling ads per hour. This proposal was first put forward by the Sydney Morning Herald, which is owned by Nine Entertainment, which also owns Channel 9, the broadcaster of the rugby league and one of the biggest takers of gambling ad dollars. So, what happens next? It seems like we're going to get a watered down version of these laws, and it seems like Australia's love affair with punting and losing on the punt isn't really going to change. Now, we want to be clear. No one here is talking about banning sports betting. If you're an adult and you want to have a punt, no one is stopping you. This isn't a nanny state telling you what you can and can't do. This is about advertising. This is about advertising where kids can see it. This is about advertising where problem gamblers can see it. This is advertising that seems to associate and intertwine sports and sports betting. Now, the vast majority of Australians don't want gambling ads in sport. A survey from December last year found that 70% of Australians supported a total ban. And when we're thinking about what this ban could look like, the best analogy to think back to is tobacco advertising. Tobacco advertising was massive in the 60s and 70s in Australia. In 1968, a cigarette ad ran every 14 minutes on Australian TV. By 1970, a large majority of the Australian public disliked cigarette ads, 74% from a survey at the time. Pretty similar to the amount of Australians that don't want gambling ads today. But the tobacco industry was a massive part of the revenue for broadcasters and sporting leagues. They spent, in today's dollars, about $125 million a year. So they were a powerful lobby that reached into the heart of government and slowed down bans for years. But when Gough Whitlam was elected in 1972, his government passed a law and banned tobacco advertising. The sports were fine, the broadcasters were fine. They have gone from strength to strength and found other sponsors. But if the government is really worried about the effect on the sporting codes and the broadcasters, perhaps they can look to Victoria as a model for what they can do. In 1987, Victoria passed a state ban on cigarette advertising and launched Vic Health, and used Vic Health to effectively buy out tobacco company sponsorship of sport. They filled the hole for broadcasters and sporting organisations with campaigns around anti-smoking, healthy eating, mental health, and skin cancer prevention. So if the government are worried about the short-term impact while these organisations find other sponsors, perhaps that buyout model is one they can look at. But we want to know what you think. Are you sick of gambling ads on TV? Or do you think this is all overblown and they should be allowed to continue? Let us know in the comments and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any future explainers.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.